Famous programmers, you know, the ones with world-class talent who get international recognition, wealth, fame, and success. Do you ever think that for every Steve Wozniak or Satoshi Nakamoto, there are hundreds or even thousands who work just as hard but never get the wealth, recognition, and fame they deserve? This is the natural fear of every solo creator and entrepreneur, dedicating their life to a fringe project but never making it, where genius-level skills crash and burn into a fire of wasted potential. This is true for no one more than Terry Davis, polarizing visionary of the TempleOS operating system, which developed in parallel with Davis's literal descent into madness, ending in his untimely death. Some claim he was an absolute genius who accomplished a colossal feat. Others think his work was at best confusing, and at worst he was a complete joke. But you have to understand, to code a complete operating system from zero is kind of like building a skyscraper with hammer and nails. Even if it's an unstable one, you have to have extreme skills and dedication to do it. In the end, one thing is for sure, we as programmers can't ignore the legacy, so let's debug the one-of-a-kind story of TempleOS. Terry Davis is the man you can't separate from the operating system. Reason being, he said he was chosen by God himself to construct the third temple from the Bible. And some publications called him God's lonely programmer because he did it all alone. Where Davis coded not just operating system kernel, but everything: a graphics interface, his own programming language, a gaming engine with a bunch of games, and much more than that. Make no mistake though, this is no Linux, with critics saying TempleOS is not just useless, but laughable with its clunky, out-of-date interface and zero real-life use cases. And these critics were pretty ruthless, especially considering Davis's arrogant paper trail of comments left on sites like Reddit and Hacker News. If you trace his old Reddit account history under the name Lusthos, which was the original name of TempleOS, you can see originally his reason for creating the operating system is because it's just fun. Interestingly, he gives many more reasons for originally creating the operating system, so it's unclear what the motive actually was. In another occasion, he said it was to mess around with programming. And later on, after he changed the name to TempleOS, it seemed like as a former atheist, he wanted to spread the word of God within the computer science community. He said, "What is it about computer science and atheism? Is it computer equals brain?" That's what once made me an atheist. Still not too sure about that. I think the answer goes beyond the notion of causality as we usually think of it. From this answer alone, you could tell Davis was a pretty smart guy, and he had his lucid moments, but unfortunately that was coupled with a very dark side. The real timeline of Davis starts back in the 1980s, when he got his first computer, a Commodore 64. He learned assembly, a very hardcore, low-level programming language, and went on to study electrical and computer engineering in college. He landed a job at Ticketmaster back in 1990, where he worked on a VAX supercomputer's operating system. Pretty interesting because this was an early computer that used virtual machines, and this concept evolved into modern cloud computing. Now it seemed like, especially being an early mover in the computer science industry, and landing this pretty good gig early on, that Davis was poised for a successful career as a programmer. He was an innovator in the truest sense of the word, across different mediums. At one point, he made a 3D milling machine, which is something you could wire up to make precise cuts, shaping things like wood. And the crazy part was you could just give this machine a CAD drawing modeled in 3D space, and it would take care of the rest. So it was almost like an early version of a 3D printer. And it wasn't working as well as he wanted, so he threw it away. But little did he know he was just one mechanical mistake away from making a fully functioning machine. And that's part of what makes the story so tragic, not on just TempleOS, which was written in under 100,000 lines, but on other projects too. He had not just the vision and the execution, but also the intelligence to bring these things to life. But unfortunately, his mental health took a sudden turn for the worse, basically overnight. Whether it was drug-induced psychosis that later led to schizophrenia, whether it was genetic or a combination of the two, is unclear. What we do know is he declined very fast, actually ending up in prison, losing his job, and then spending time in a mental facility. And unfortunately, he would never recover from this sudden crash, from then on living on Social Security disability payments. His parents also took him in, and had they not, he would not have survived as long as he did. In this time, he also started suffering from hallucinations. He claimed men in suits were coming to visit him, and God was talking to him on a regular basis. Now, it's not completely clear if he started the Lusthos operating system, then had the visions and changed, and whether it was an evolution of the project, or if he was inspired by God from the beginning. But one way or another, he did seem powered by divine inspiration, coding basically day and night to build everything from scratch to hundreds of thousands of lines of code. He successfully then created the 64-bit operating system. He took up 2 megabytes of memory and he made it open source for anyone to download online, and you can still download it today. TempleOS was far from the ideal operating system though. Its resolution was only 640 with a 16-bit color profile. Even OSs that predated Temple by many years, like MS-DOS, beat it on basically every technical dimension. The operating system was truly open. With the Red Sea file system, you could modify the code for anything. And the code was all written in a custom programming language called Holy C. The code all executes in ring 0, which is as close to the core of the operating system as you can get, which is very good for performance, but it's also not secure. When you compare it with Linux, which is also free, open source, and has things like a server OS and full networking capabilities, by comparison, Temple doesn't really offer much. Considering even if Temple could do these things, it wouldn't be able to do them securely, and the fact it lacks even basic productivity apps, well, it can't really hold a candle to Linux. Now, the OS was gaming focused, as stated by Davis, and this is immediately apparent when you boot it up. Right on the home screen, you can see a bunch of different games, one being called After Egypt, where the input is praising God, and then you get a biblical quote back in return. And there was even a 3D flight simulator, which was a bit buggy, but no doubt playable. And now an operating system purely based around games doesn't exist, and it is an interesting concept, especially when you consider the lower level you run games at, the better performance they have. With games like Roller Coaster Tycoon that were written in assembly being able to run on even the worst computers. And an OS with a massive performance delta over the alternatives could have been viable back in the day. But as computers got exponentially better, this became less of a pain point. So maybe with better execution at one point in time, Temple could have been relevant to just try to give an optimistic viewpoint on things. And though Temple has gotten more respect in recent years, when people first found about it, they were absolutely ruthless. And as time went on, it seems like he couldn't even get basic respect due to his comment history, losing all sympathy for his decline as he made some pretty racist remarks. With OS News calling him a controversial figure, to say the least, and banning him for posting for making vulgar and homophobic comments. Though some were more sympathetic and even inspired, calling Temple a testament to the dedication of one man displaying his technological progress, and it doesn't need to be anything more. Unfortunately, as time went on, his situation continued to decline, with him ending up living in his car, posting vlogs online as a homeless man, and eventually at the age of 48, as he was walking along a train track at night, he was hit and killed by a train. Some speculate it was suicide, but we'll never fully know. One thing's for sure though, the legacy of TempleOS is an interesting one. He definitely got a bit more recognition and fame after his passing away, with some holding incredibly favorable views, even saying if he channeled his genius and energy in a different direction, he could have even been on the level of the next Steve Wozniak. Doesn't change the fact though that as much as we hype up the TempleOS product, it just doesn't have any practical applications. It lacks pretty much all quality of life features, so if we measure by impact, it scores a 0. But if you look at the story holistically or even poetically, there's a lot to be learned from Davis's headwinds from mental illness, his decade-long dedication to his craft and passion project. He was a true fringe innovator who just never got his big break in the end. And for that, he deserves a spot in the Programming Hall of Fame. Rest in peace to Terry Davis, and long live TempleOS.